Welcome back. In this video, I'm going over should my employer be paying me sick pay? In this video, I'm going to cover exactly when your employer should be providing you with sick pay, and I give away a documentation template so that you can fill out the information and give it to your employer. And we'll be talking about how to talk to your employer about this because some employers may not be aware. And if you are an employer, be sure to check out my videos that follow this one, as they'll be covering providing sick pay, paid family leave from your perspective, including getting an advance on funds if you need it. The Coronavirus Response Act that was passed into law at the end of March requires some businesses to pay you sick pay and paid family leave. Yes, that's absurd. So how do you know if your employer qualifies to be required to pay you sick pay and paid family leave, as well as they're going to get reimbursed for it 100%? So how do you know if your employer is required to pay you sick pay? If your employer employs less than 500 employees, then they are required to do so and qualify to be reimbursed through a tax credit. However, there are exceptions for various industries and additional limitations. So, for example, restaurants apply the 500 on a per location basis with an additional limitation. If you know that the business you work for qualified for the PPP loan, then they most likely qualify for the sick pay tax credit. If you're in a very small business, then of course you'll know if you're under that 500 mark. If you're in a mid-sized business, you may need to do some more investigation. Otherwise, these small and mid-sized employers are required to provide the sick pay. So when do you qualify? So let's say you start feeling sick any days from April 1st through December 31st of 2020. Any of those dates are going to qualify for your employer to pay your wages and for them to be reimbursed for those. Now, let's talk about the criteria. Like, what is the criteria to qualify? So the first is if you're required to isolate or self-quarantine. So let's say that you had flown back into the country in April or even May or even in a future month, and this 14-day required quarantine is still in effect, and you were supposed to go back to work. Well, those dates would qualify for sick pay. Situation number 2 is you've gone to a health provider and the health provider has instructed you to quarantine because of COVID-related reasons. Number 3, you have symptoms and you're seeking a diagnosis. So maybe you're waiting to meet a doctor. And on that note, I will tell you, be sure to get set up with your insurance's online website, because many insurance companies are even offering free consultations directly through the websites. Now, obviously, if you have any symptoms, and if tests aren't available like in most places, and you're not critically sick, they're going to tell you to stay home and isolate, and then you'll have a record of that. The fourth and final reason is for any substantially similar situation. Also, be aware that if you take care of anyone in these situations, or if you have a child that's at home because their school or daycare is closed, then you'll qualify through this same program through paid family leave that your employer has to provide and is reimbursed for. So be sure to check out my other video about paid family leave. So how much are you going to be paid? You're going to be paid 100% of your wages for up to 2 weeks, 10 days. And you're going to be paid at your regular rate that you're normally paid, so long as that's above all of the minimum requirements for state, federal, local laws. If by chance that amount is lower than those, you'll be paid the highest requirement, as is legally correct. Now, there is a cap at $511 per day and $5,110 in total for the 2 weeks. Now, if you're a full-time employee, this is going to be based on 80 hours. If you're a part-time employee, you want to base it on the average that you normally work. And this should be based on, first, your average of 2-week periods, the amount of time you worked, on average for the last 2-week periods over the last 6 months. If you haven't been working that long, you would look at whatever was in your agreement, how many hours you agreed to work in the agreement. And if you didn't agree or it's substantially different, then base it on the average of 2-week periods that you've worked in the business so far. And you must have been employed with this employer for at least 30 days to qualify for the paid sick leave. So that covers the details. Let's take a look at the documentation forms that I'm giving away. Now, this is the information that you can give your employer as documentation for your situation requesting leave. And then your employer needs this information on file as proof for their IRS credit to get reimbursed for what they pay you. You can save these by going to File in the top left corner right under the name and going Download to PDF. You can also click Make a Copy and you'll be prompted to log into Google Drive, where it will make a copy of this document in your Google Drive. Then you could actually type in and change things so that you have the information updated virtually. You could send it through email. You could save it as a PDF so that no one else can change your document. The other thing is you don't have to use these forms at all. It's just what I created to be convenient for you. You can just get a piece of paper and write down the information as we even go through it on this video. With sick pay, you're required to take it consecutively all the way through, which makes sense because of these situations, right? If you have COVID-19 and you're staying home, you shouldn't be coming into work one day and going home another. Now, you might be able to do some telecommuting. So let's jump into the employee sick pay documentation. You're going to put in your name and the dates you request leave for. There's an extra line here because, it might be hard to know your beginning and your end date. Maybe you know the beginning date, but when exactly is it going to end? So if you want to add some details, you can do so on that second line. Now, what is the COVID-19 situation for which sick pay is requested? So these were the exact things I just covered. Required to quarantine, a health provider told me to quarantine, I have symptoms, or any other similar situation. You need to include documentation for your COVID-19 reason for taking sick pay. So you can see I've included personal statement here, which is just the last page of this form, and that can just be you stating the situation. If there's any other documentation, you want to try to include something. Keep in mind, something like writing out what happened, that's documentation. Date it, sign it, write the situation. From a legal standpoint, tax standpoint, that's documentation. So any other documentation you have is great. Let's say you meet with a healthcare provider and they told you to self-quarantine. Ask them for some documentation that that's what came out of your appointment. You might be able to just take a screenshot of that. If you do it in an online insurance portal, they may have that already set up for you, or any other documentation you can come up with. But just keep in mind, even if it seems minor or small, it matters. Include it. And lastly, you want to include a statement that you are unable to work or telecommute because of the nature of your work and or the COVID-19 reason. And that's all. That basically covers it. I'd love to hear your questions in the comments below. If you're new here, consider subscribing. If you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate it if you give it a like and share it with other people who might need it. I do give away a free business spreadsheet template for basic accounting, quarterly taxes, and end-of-year taxes. And I have a full-blown e-course for full accurate accounting records that are beyond just that basic for sale on my website, along with other e-courses and free resources as well. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye.